Welcome, y'all. Fitness for 55 Plus podcast brought to you by Stronger Life, the gym for folks over 55 in Lexington, Kentucky. My name is Dr. Dustin Jones, physical therapist.
Dr. Jeff Musgrave, physical therapist.
All right, so we have a question from a member. So Doug is a member, and he saw a New York Times article that was talking about myths, fitness myths, and this author kind of challenged and dug into a lot of kind of long-held preconceived notions about fitness. And one of them was about stretching, the benefits of it. Is it as helpful as a lot of people perceive? And then what's a good way to kind of warm up and prepare for movement? So we're going to dive into this because this has changed a lot in our careers as physical therapists and coaches. So let's kind of rewind back to kind of 2008, 2009, when we were in physical therapy school then. So we were also newly retired runners, collegiate runners. So at that time, how did you view static stretching? When we say static, for those that aren't familiar, we're talking about you are holding kind of at the end range, and you're holding a position. You're not moving, so it's static. So like if I'm trying to stretch the back of my leg or my hamstring, if I've got my leg straight out and I'm bending over to try and touch my toes and I hold that position, that's a static stretch for your hamstring, for example. So how did you perceive that back in 2008, 2009?
Yeah, I mean, every time before I ran, that's what I did.
Mm-hmm.
Static stretching was injury prevention for the most part. Holding those positions, loosening up the joints by holding those positions was meant to help prevent injuries, and that's how we used them at that point and in my running career too.
Yeah.
So
I did the same, and I did it in the hope of injury prevention, and it did not. I had like so many hamstring strains throughout college, but I continued to do those stretches.
But I mean, like as a sprinter and a runner and a jumper, like very big explosive movements, and like if that's what you're told is going to help, then you're just going to double down.
Right.
Right? So you did more stretching.
I did more of it. Despite the outcomes, I did more. So that was kind of, back then, that's kind of the norm. Stretching was viewed as injury prevention, and you would do it before some type of physical activity. But things have changed a lot. So let's go through a Stronger Life class of how we prepare for movement in our class, and then maybe the role of static stretching in our class. Because what the evidence points to now is what we are doing in our Stronger Life classes. So yeah, how do you program that period of time, that warm up, to prep people for what they're going to do in class?
Yeah, and I think prep's a great way to think about it. So active warm-ups are now promoted way more heavily for performance and for injury prevention, not static stretching. So in a Stronger Life workout, we're going to spend a few minutes moving every joint we're going to use in the workout. Every joint's going to get movement, and we're going to be working on the same movement pattern we're going to load later. So we do unloaded movements where we can take the joint through multiple repetitions and get blood flow to the area and work on the movement patterns. So one thing that's really nice about doing unloaded movements like that is it helps release fluid in the joints. And a lot of people that have arthritis, have stiffness and pain, especially when they first get up in the morning, they'll notice as they start moving more, they actually loosen up and feel better. And most of our members from round 1 to round 2 of our active warm-up before class will be moving through a lot more range of motion, and their joints will be loosened up. And a big factor of that is getting blood flow to the joint and then releasing that joint fluid. So we make sure to do that for all the major joints and muscles that we're going to be using in the workout. We're trying to get the heart rate up a little bit, prep the joints, work on the movement pattern. So that's all active movements, no static holds.
Yeah.
And then after a great workout, that's where we can put our static stretching. So now the research says after you've had your bout of exercise, that's a good time to stretch. When things are loosened up, they're warm, there's good blood flow, the joint's moving well, that's a nice time to loosen up those muscles. Sometimes people will experience some pain relief from that, And it's a nice time to be able to like start getting that heart rate down. The static stretching pairs really well with getting your heart rate down in those static holds, because when we're doing static stretching, we want to be doing breath work anyway, so it's kind of a natural time to like put those together.
Yeah.
But the literature, you know, the way it's flipped is just like static stretching before actually may increase your injury risk.
Yeah.
Instead of reduce it.
Right.
So it's kind of
performance.
Yeah, or you just don't perform as well.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting how that's changed.
Yeah. Yeah. So in the active warm up like that, like Jeff said, like we're mimicking what we're going to do that day. And so I view that as like such a good use of time. And there's a direct correlation to whatever movements we do in the warm up to like what we're going to be doing in kind of the workout piece. So active or dynamic, you may hear that as well, but you're moving, you're getting your heart rate up, moving your joints to the full range of motion before your hard bout of activity. And then the static stretching comes after. So that's kind of a good rule of thumb for individuals. And I think, you know, we want to be clear too that like static stretching, you know, we're not saying it's bad or it's the devil, if you will, but it doesn't necessarily prevent injuries. It does have its role, you know, maybe pain reduction techniques. It does make people feel a little bit better. It can reduce some soreness, some muscle soreness from like a hard workout, for example. But it has its place, and it's not before you're about to do a strenuous bout of activity. It's usually after. But, you know, in 10 years we may say different, but right now it's what the evidence is pointing to.
Yeah, just one other thing I want to mention is, you know, a lot of the times when we're stretching, we're stretching to improve our range of motion. And a lot of times if we just stretch to improve our range of motion and we don't do strength training, like we don't add external resistance like a dumbbell or a resistance band, then we don't actually typically keep those results. So a lot of the literature now, if you're thinking stretching is for range of motion, the best results on range of motion, the literature seems to be shifting towards strength training. Just doing strength training, functional movements with resistance to improve your range of motion more than like static stretching. Or if you do static stretching, make sure to move the joint through range of motion after if you're using it for that point to make it more permanent. But if you just stretch it and then go get on the couch, like it's not going to help a whole lot.
Right. Versus if you do a strength training movement through its full range of motion, you'll probably, you know, maintain or improve your range of motion and get stronger.
Yes.
And your bones will get stronger. And there's multiple benefits to that versus like maybe just one with stretching. So that has proper place, but probably a lesser place than how most people
like if we're using this like a meal analogy, it's like a small side dish of what you should be doing for your fitness. I mean, some studies say a couple times a week, 5 or 10 minutes. Like you're good.
Right.
Not the 150 minutes of high intensity exercise. Like you're not helping yourself from a longevity standpoint really by working on stretching.
Yeah. There you have it, folks. So if you have any other questions kind of along this topic, stretching, warm up, whatever, related to health, fitness, or folks over 55, the best place to ask those is in our Facebook group. So if you go to Facebook, search Fitness for 55 Plus, and you can request to join. And then in there, we're in there all the time, answering questions, sharing helpful resources. There's about 1,000 other folks over 55 that are from all over the world that are all like-minded individuals that just want to be the best versions of themselves. So hop in that group and then submit your question there. Also, if you've enjoyed this podcast, enjoy this content, please share it with a friend, family member that you think could benefit. We're just really grateful for y'all tuning in, listening every week, and just being a part of kind of this bigger, stronger life community. So submit those questions. We love talking about them, and we'll talk to y'all in a couple weeks.